I'm 67 years old. My name is Frank, and I need to tell you something that no one else will. I need to tell you the truth about retirement. Not the fantasy you see in the commercials, with the smiling, gray-haired couples walking on the beach. Not the dream your financial advisor sells you, with the charts and graphs promising a life of leisure. I need to tell you the real, raw, ugly truth. I retired 2 years ago, and I am miserable. Utterly, completely, soul-crushingly miserable. And it's because I got everything wrong. I believed the lie of the golden years, and now I'm paying the price. So please, listen to me, because I don't want you to end up like me. For 42 years, I was a history professor at a small liberal arts college. I loved my job. I loved the rhythm of the academic year, the smell of old books, the spark of curiosity in a student's eyes. My life was a series of semesters and papers and lectures. It was predictable. It was comfortable. It was my world. And I was good at it. I was a respected scholar, a beloved teacher. I had a purpose. I had an identity. I was Professor Frank Miller. Like so many of my peers, I viewed retirement as the finish line, the reward for a life of hard work. I dreamed of it. I planned for it. I counted down the days. My wife Susan and I had it all mapped out. We would sell our house in the cold Northeast and move to a sunny community in Florida. We would travel. We would play golf. We would finally have time for ourselves. It was the perfect plan, a plan that millions of people follow every year. A plan that is supposed to lead to happiness. And for the first 6 months it did. The new house was beautiful. The weather was perfect. We joined the local country club. I played golf 3 times a week. We took a cruise to the Caribbean. It was everything we had dreamed of. But then a strange thing happened. The novelty started to wear off. The endless sunshine started to feel monotonous. The golf games started to feel repetitive. The conversations at the country club started to feel shallow. I found myself feeling bored. And then the boredom curdled into something darker, apathy. And then the apathy descended into a full-blown depression. I would wake up in the morning and stare at the ceiling, filled with a sense of dread. Another day of sunshine, another day of nothing. Another day of being useless. I had no classes to prepare, no papers to grade, no students to mentor. I had no one to talk to about the things that interested me. My new friends in Florida didn't want to discuss the fall of the Roman Empire. They wanted to talk about their golf scores and their grandchildren. I felt like a fish out of water, a ghost at a feast. I was surrounded by people, but I had never felt more alone. Susan tried to help. She encouraged me to find a hobby. I tried painting. I tried fishing. I tried volunteering. But nothing stuck. Nothing filled the gaping hole that my career had left behind. I started drinking more. I started snapping at Susan. I started to withdraw into myself. I would spend hours just sitting on our beautiful lanai, staring at the perfectly manicured golf course, feeling nothing but a profound sense of emptiness. I had worked my whole life for this. This was supposed to be my reward, but it felt like a punishment. It felt like a life sentence. One evening, Susan found me crying in my study. She sat down next to me and took my hand. "Frank," she said, her voice full of a gentle concern that I hadn't earned. "This isn't you. You used to be so full of life, so full of passion. Now, you're just a shell. What happened?" And for the first time in 2 years, I was honest. I told her everything. I told her about the emptiness, the loneliness, the feeling of being useless. I told her that I had made a terrible mistake. I told her that I was miserable. That conversation was the beginning of a long and difficult journey, a journey that I am still on, a journey of trying to understand what I got wrong. And I think, after 2 years of soul-searching, I'm finally starting to figure it out. And that's what I want to share with you. The 3 big lies I believed about retirement. The 3 things I got wrong. The first thing I got wrong. I thought retirement was a destination. I saw retirement as a finish line, a place I would arrive at, and then that was it. The race was over. I could finally rest. But that's not how life works. Life is a journey, not a destination. And retirement is not an ending, it's a transition. A major, life-altering transition. And I was completely unprepared for it. I had spent 40 years building a life, a career, an identity. And then, in one day, it was all gone. And I had nothing to replace it with. I had no plan for what came next. I had a plan for my finances, but not for my life. I had a plan for my time, but not for my soul. I was like a ship that had been sailing towards a distant shore for 40 years. And when I finally arrived, I found that the shore was a barren wasteland, and I had nowhere else to go. So if you are thinking about retirement, I beg you, do not think of it as a destination. Think of it as a new beginning, a new chapter, a new adventure, and start planning for it now. Not just financially, but emotionally and psychologically and spiritually. Ask yourself the hard questions. Who will I be without my job? What will give my life meaning and purpose? How will I stay connected to the world? How will I continue to grow and learn and contribute? If you don't have answers to these questions, you are not ready to retire. You are just setting yourself up for a fall. The second thing I got wrong. I thought leisure equaled happiness. Our society worships leisure. We are constantly bombarded with images of people on vacation, on yachts, on golf courses. We are told that the ultimate goal in life is to not have to work, to be able to do whatever you want, whenever you want. I bought into that lie, hook, line, and sinker. I thought that a life of endless leisure would be a life of endless happiness. But I was wrong. So wrong. Leisure is a wonderful thing in small doses. It's a necessary respite from the stresses of work, but a life of pure leisure is a life without challenge, a life without growth, a life without meaning. It's a spiritual dead end. Humans are not meant to be idle. We are meant to be engaged. We are meant to be productive. We are meant to have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And that reason cannot be a tea time. I learned this the hard way. The first few months of playing golf every day were great, but then it became a chore. It became a way to kill time. It became a symbol of my own uselessness. I wasn't creating anything. I wasn't contributing to anything. I was just hitting a ball. And it wasn't enough. It could never be enough. So don't fall into the trap of thinking that leisure will make you happy. It won't. What will make you happy is purpose. It's having a reason to exist. It's feeling like you are making a difference in the world, no matter how small. So, find your purpose, find your passion, find your reason, and then pursue it with all your heart. That is the true secret to a happy retirement. Not a life of leisure, but a life of meaning. The third thing I got wrong. I thought my past was my future. I thought that the person I was at 65 would be the person I would be for the rest of my life. I thought that my interests, my passions, my relationships, they were all set in stone. I was a history professor. I loved books. I loved teaching. I loved my wife. And I thought that would be enough to sustain me in retirement. But I was wrong. Retirement is a profound identity shift. It changes you. It forces you to re-examine everything you thought you knew about yourself. And if you are not willing to change, to adapt, to grow, you will be left behind. You will become a relic of your former self, a ghost haunting the halls of your own life. I had to learn to be a new person. I had to learn to be Frank, not Professor Miller. I had to learn to find joy in new things. I had to learn to build new relationships. I had to learn to be a husband in a new way, a 24/7 husband, not just an evening and weekends husband. It was the hardest work I have ever done. Harder than getting my PhD, harder than writing 3 books, harder than teaching for 42 years. But it was also the most important work I have ever done. I'm still a work in progress. I still have bad days. I still feel the pull of the void. But now I have a fighting chance. I started a small online history book club. It's not the same as teaching, but it's something. It's a connection. It's a purpose. I started taking long walks on the beach with Susan, not just to kill time, but to really talk, to reconnect. We are learning to be a new kind of couple. It's not always easy, but it's real, and it's worth it. So, as you approach retirement, be prepared to change. Be prepared to let go of who you were and to embrace who you are becoming. Be open to new experiences, new people, new passions. Be willing to be a beginner again. Be willing to be vulnerable. Be willing to grow. Because retirement is not a time to coast. It's a time to climb a new mountain. A mountain that you have never seen before. A mountain that will challenge you and scare you and change you. And the view from the top, it's worth every step of the journey. I know this is not the retirement story you wanted to hear. It's not the story I wanted to live, but it's the truth. And I believe that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing that can set us free. So please, learn from my mistakes. Don't believe the lies. Don't walk into retirement unprepared. Ask the hard questions, do the hard work, and create a retirement that is not just a long, slow decline into oblivion, but a vibrant, meaningful, and joyful new chapter of your life. You deserve it. We all do. Let me break down the anatomy of my misery, because it wasn't a sudden event. It was a slow, creeping fog that enveloped me before I even realized I was lost. It was a series of small deaths that led to a larger one. The first death was the death of routine. For 42 years, my life was governed by the bell that started class, the bell that ended it. The academic calendar was my compass. September was a beginning, May was an ending. I had a rhythm, a structure that held my life together. When I retired, that structure vanished overnight. I was adrift in a sea of unstructured time, and it was terrifying. I would wake up and the day would stretch before me like a vast, empty desert. I had no appointments to keep, no deadlines to meet, no one to answer to. And instead of feeling liberating, it felt paralyzing. I was a prisoner of my own freedom. The second death was the death of intellectual challenge. As a professor, my mind was constantly engaged. I was reading, I was writing, I was debating, I was being challenged by my students and my colleagues. My brain was a muscle that was being exercised every single day. When I retired, that muscle began to atrophy. The conversations at the country club were about golf handicaps and property values, not about the Peloponnesian War. The books I was reading were mindless thrillers, not dense historical tomes. My mind, once a sharp, well-honed instrument, began to feel dull and sluggish. I could feel myself getting stupider, and it was a horrifying sensation. The third death was the death of social connection. I'd always been a bit of an introvert, but my job forced me to be social. I had to interact with students, with faculty, with administrators. I was part of a community that valued my contributions, a community where I belonged. When I retired, I was ripped out of that community. My new community in Florida was a community of strangers. We were all from different places with different backgrounds and different interests. The only thing we had in common was our age and our zip code, and that wasn't enough to build real connections. I would go to social events and feel like an alien. I would smile and nod and make small talk, but I never felt seen. I never felt understood. I was surrounded by people, but I was profoundly, achingly alone. The fourth death was the death of identity. This is the one I've talked about the most, but it bears repeating because it is the most devastating. When you lose your professional identity, you lose a part of yourself. You lose the story you have been telling yourself and the world for your entire adult life. And you are left with a terrifying question: who am I now? I had no answer to that question. I was a blank slate, a man without a story. And a man without a story is a man without a soul. These four deaths, the death of routine, the death of challenge, the death of connection, and the death of identity, they created a perfect storm of misery. They created a vacuum in my life that was filled with anxiety and depression and despair. I was a man in free fall, with no parachute and no ground in sight. So, what did I get wrong? I got wrong the very definition of retirement. I thought retirement was about stopping work, stopping stress, stopping responsibility. But retirement is not about stopping. It's about starting a new chapter, starting a new identity, starting a new purpose. And I had no idea how to start. I also got wrong the nature of happiness. I thought happiness was a passive state, something that would just happen to me once I had enough money and enough free time. But happiness is not passive. It is an active pursuit. It is the byproduct of a life of purpose and connection and growth. It is something you have to build every single day. And I had no tools to build it with. And finally, I got wrong the importance of preparation. And I don't mean financial preparation. I mean emotional and psychological preparation. I spent 40 years preparing for my financial retirement. I spent 0 years preparing for my personal retirement. I was like an astronaut who had trained for the physical rigors of space but had never considered the psychological toll of being alone in the dark. And when the darkness came, I was completely and utterly lost. So what is the way out? I wish I could give you a simple, easy answer, a 5-step plan to a happy retirement. But there isn't one. The journey is different for everyone. But I can tell you what has helped me. I can tell you the small steps I have taken to find my way back to the light. First, I had to admit that I was in trouble. I had to let go of my pride, my ego, my lifelong belief that I could solve any problem on my own. I had to be vulnerable. I had to ask for help. And that was the hardest and most important step. Second, I had to find a new routine, a new structure for my days. It's not as rigid as my old academic calendar, but it's a structure nonetheless. I wake up at the same time every day. I take a walk on the beach. I spend an hour on my book club work. I have lunch with Susan. I take a nap. I work on my Spanish. It's a simple routine, but it gives my days a shape, a rhythm, a sense of purpose. Third, I had to find a new way to challenge my mind. The book club has been a godsend. It has forced me to read books I would never have chosen on my own. It has forced me to think critically, to articulate my ideas, to engage in intellectual debate. It has reminded me that I am still a scholar, even if I don't have a title anymore. Fourth, I had to find a new way to connect with people, and I had to be intentional about it. I had to be the one to reach out, to make the first move. I started a weekly coffee meeting with a few of the men from my book club. We talk about books, of course, but we also talk about life. We talk about our struggles, our fears, our hopes. We are building real friendships, the kind of friendships I never had before. And fifth, I had to find a new identity, a new story to tell myself. I am no longer Professor Frank Miller. I am Frank. I am a husband, a father, a grandfather. I am a reader, a writer, a thinker. I am a mentor, a friend, a work in progress. And that is enough. I am enough. It's a slow process. It's a daily struggle. But for the first time in 2 years, I feel a flicker of hope. I feel a glimmer of the man I used to be, and a glimpse of the man I could become. I am not miserable anymore. I am recovering. I am rebuilding. I am starting over. So, my final word to you is this. Do not fear retirement, but do not underestimate it. It is a powerful and transformative force, and it will break you if you are not prepared. So prepare yourself, not just your finances, but your heart and your mind and your soul. And then, when the time comes, you can step into retirement not with dread, but with anticipation. Not with emptiness, but with purpose. Not with misery, but with joy. And you will have a retirement that is not a lie, but a truth. A beautiful and meaningful and deeply human truth.